Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. Virginia and Martin Pytela take a closer look at self-governing and how it can bring about freedom in every area of our lives. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
Martin, after our last segment, you and I continued our conversation about how to practically implement your method with our first responders. And as our conversation went on a little bit, fascinating. You're an immigrant. I'm an immigrant. Tell us a little bit about that and why you are so committed to get this information out with excellence.
Whew. Okay, well, that gets kind of emotional for me. I grew up in Czechoslovakia. It was a communist country controlled by Russia. And when I was 16, we had that event in 1968 where there was this change of regime where the Czechs started to gain freedom. And in August of 68, the Russians rolled in with tanks and suppressed it. I was 16 at that time. By the time I was 24, it was very clear to me that I could not stay living in that country because I lost the faith that the people will rise up and reject the oppression. That the whole totalitarian system is based on a lie. I knew I was lying. They knew I was lying. I knew that they knew that I was lying, and they still pretended that this was how it should be. Double speak. You know that you're saying a lie, and you're saying it because it's the way to play the game in the system. I couldn't have it. So I gave up my family, my background, my everything. I was leaving on a one-way ticket, right? I was a refugee because if they caught me, I would end up in the equivalent of Gulag.
Wow. So
I left. There was 7 of us, a group of 7 that got together. We conspired and we got out. And then I ended up in Canada seeking freedom, believing that I was in the free world. And of course, as time went on, we're now seeing that the loss of freedom coming our way. I mean, Canada is now practically a police state. This last event where we had these truckers go to protest the oppressive measures of the government, they were treated like criminals. All they were citizens with an opinion.
It was an amazing thing to see how the world responded to the courage, to the strength, to the conviction of those Canadian truck drivers. I don't think we'll soon forget that.
And yet the government's still in power and the leaders of this movement are in jail.
Exactly.
Which is very similar to what happened in the United States around the January 6th thing.
You know what came to mind while you were speaking? I was remembering one of my favorite verses in the Bible where it said that captivity was led captive. And I think that's what's happening. We're watching some amazing things happening in the world stage, specifically what's happening in the Middle East. Yeah. What I find beautiful about the privilege and the honor to be alive at this stage in history is that we're watching prophetic value of the scriptures unfold. Because if you read the book of Ezekiel 37, 38, and 39, we are watching this timeline. And this is why it's important. So much of your work with the metabolic systems are predictable. So when something's predictable, it's preventable. The value of prophecy, it's that it's telling you the predictability, right? Yeah. So it's predictable. There's something tangible that we can rest in because there's something happening that's bigger than us. You've tapped into laws of nature in your work, things that are self-evident, that speak to our natural affections, right? Yeah. And you found the rhythm that can facilitate healing. In my world and in my line of work, I have to do that spiritually, psychologically, and physically. I have to tie those three things in. And one of the things that I take joy in and pleasure in spite of the pain, both you and I can have this discussion and have a knot in our throat because of what it cost us. Those stories are woven into the constitution of our cells.
Yes.
But you know, Martin, I think it's a beautiful and an amazing time to be alive. And I think there's a lot of reasons why we mustn't despair. And that is that when we take inventory of history, of governments, if you will, and we become educated, we all have the natural resources within our soul, our mind, our heart, our will, our conscience, our feelings, and above all, our spirit that's made to live. To say, wait a minute, not on my watch, not on my time, and not this go around.
You know, you're having some really interesting words here, and it's showing up the two methods of thinking, the collectivist or the individualist.
That's right.
Do we appreciate the agency of an individual, the power within us to actually be an actor of our own history, as opposed to the collectivist method by which it says the individual doesn't matter, you're like an ant, obey.
That's right. Cooperate. Do. Yeah. Jonathan, our executive producer, Amanda, and I have been having a really tough conversation over the last almost going in a year and a half now. And it's about language. We've lost the language of liberty. And I so appreciate what you're saying, because as we have these meaningful conversations in the most fundamental way about metabolic function, you are systematically giving us language for that very principle you discussed, which was what? Your capacity to individually self-govern, and it can start with your mind, your heart, your will, your conscience that's in a state of confusion, chaos, and dis-ease because you're feeling bad. Thank God your body's talking to you, because sometimes we can't hear our psyche and we dismiss spiritual things. So thank God we have the last anchor of hope, which is our diseased bodies, which is cancer, autoimmune diseases, right? All these metabolic functions are amazing because they're calling us back into this universal principle of self-governance. You know what I mean? And it's an invitation, I think, by God to say, hey, I made you like me, spirit, soul, and body. You have the strength, you have the power, you have the capacity to heal. And yes, of course, pray to me. You need to be in alignment with me. But I gave you a conscience to determine what that would look like. But the rest, you keep asking me to do for you things that I made you to do for yourself.
Yeah. I have the word called agency.
Yes.
You are the agent in your life.
Yes.
You own the outcome. The opposite of this would be the victim personality. The victim personality says this was done to me and I could do nothing about it. And the response on my side would be, stuff happened. It put you in places. You could be washed down the creek. But now that you are there, what will you do? It's up to you to dig yourself out of this.
That's right. Rise up. Rise up.
Yeah.
In Czechoslovakia, that core, that spirit in you, that conviction was stirred by nothing short, in my opinion, of everything God deposited in you as a man. But you, like my father, had the strength, the courage to say, I gotta go this path, because the alternative is really a slow death.
Yes. Yes, exactly well said.
3 rules to live by that I recently commented on. And I heard a politician of all things that rose up, defected, changed parties. And he said, look, at the end of the day, please leave this room knowing these 3 things to be completely irrefutable. And I think I'll let you comment after I read these three things. When you give a sphere of government power, it will never voluntarily give it back. Whether it's violating your conscience and giving into darkness like P. Diddy did, whether it is an unhealthy relationship that you know you shouldn't be in, whether it's the fear of cancer, which does not have the final word, or whether it is a totalitarian, an increasingly totalitarian government. If you give your agency, I love Martin's word, if you give your free agency up to that thing, it will never voluntarily relinquish power over you.
Let me comment on that while we're at it.
Yes.
Which is, you are dealing with a parasite.
Yes.
And a parasite will never leave you without a purge. You must purge it. And
Amazing.
The parasite is the mindset of taking from you, living off of you. That's how government works.
Amazing. Amazing. It can't be said any more simply than that. Principle number 2, that sphere of government that's seductively vying for your affection, it will ultimately abuse that power that you give it to the maximum extent possible. And I would say in accordance with compliance of things that you never thought you would comply to 2-3 years ago. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the gradual. You give an inch, they take a mile. And you give a mile, they take the whole world.
That's right. It's happening.
It cannot help itself. Again, we're dealing with a parasite. And parasite, just like cancer, knows only one direction, forward. It can only start consuming more, pulling more of everything into itself.
And that parasitical constitution that's undermining our very life, and it manifests in many different forms, is no opposition for the created force, the divine, the creator, the creative force that lives within you, evidenced by identifying the things that Martin talked about. We have a system that is made, it is equipped to intuitively, autonomically sustain your life. Let's bring our mind, our heart, our will, our conscience, our deepest convictions in alignment with that and not be seduced by the other spiritual existential force that is always vying to get us to compromise and seduce those convictions to relinquish power to them. I don't care if it's spirit, soul, body, governments. It doesn't matter. It will always encroach on your life in such a way that it aims for your destruction. It is a law of nature. And I love what Martin said. Ultimately, yes, there's a parasitical constitution to that force, but don't forget that the life-giving force is greater and it's inside of you. And by the way, those things are temporal. Parasites, bacteria, all those things are temporal. The other is eternal. So center yourself in the knowledge of those things. Number 3, nobody ever complied their way out of totalitarianism.
Oppression. Yeah. Yeah. You cannot lie your way into truth.
Liberty is a function of your soul. It's woven into your most fundamental agency to self-govern. And the gauge of that liberty is your conscience. Freedom is external. It's the consequence of that. You cannot have freedom without liberty. And that's why your words are so powerful.
Let me try and say it this way. When you try to give it up to a higher authority.
Give what up?
A problem you have. any challenge that you're experiencing, Father, take care of it for me. No, no, no. You are the party that is going to dig you out. We are adults, not children. A child is supposed to be protected by the parent. But once you become an adult, your freedom comes at the end of your willingness to work for it. It's not given. It's always earned.
And I would add, even in our adulthood, there's that quiet, still voice that obviously Martin heard, and it said, you were meant for more than this. I can help you heal. And I'd like you to finish this segment with your thoughts on this. But you heard that voice in Czechoslovakia. You heard that voice here as an executive with compromised health. You've heard that quiet, still voice. And I think it is the voice of that Father, personal, intimate Father God that calls us and draws us to himself. I think it's a quiet, still voice of that Father that knows and remembers our limitations, but says, I'm right here. Now do it. Trust me. Step out. Do what I'm asking you to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely that. It's the voice of purpose. It's the voice of personal. Liberty comes with a responsibility. They are not separated. You cannot have liberty without working for it.
Nope. Thank you so much, Martin. What a pleasure. I feel like I met my brother. You're my brother.
Thank you.
From another mom. We have the same dad, but I tell you, this is amazing. Thank you so much.
Virginia, it's a real honor.
Listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to R.E.S.T with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.